Let us turn to matters in the UK Parliament then, and a reasoned amendment. Let me start by explaining what a reasoned amendment is, and this is from the Parliament website.
I was going to explain it because I looked it up, but you looked it up.
I was worried it was going to be a test. I was worried it was going to be a test.
So you go ahead, Calum. You tell us what a reasoned amendment is.
You guys critique because I've copy and pasted off the Parliament website, so if I'm wrong, then we've got bigger issues. Here is a reasoned amendment. If an MP wishes to record reasons for objecting to the second reading, or more rarely the third reading of a bill, they can table a reasoned amendment. The reasoned amendment should offer reasons for rejecting the bill. Okay, that brings us then to the welfare bill, because over 100 Labour MPs have united to oppose the government's proposed disability benefit cuts. It includes this group 10 Labour Select Committee chairs. They have signed this reasoned amendment to the welfare bill, so if passed, it would compel the government to withdraw the measures, which aim to save the Treasury £5 billion. Despite the strong opposition, the Chancellor says there will be no U-turn on the contentious reforms. Have I teed it up appropriately? Does that all make sense? Are we all on the same page?
I'm glad you didn't get confused with a wrecking amendment.
I mean, in some ways, the outcome
you
is...
deal with those all the time in the Lords.
Yeah.
Wrecking amendments used to be fun and games. But
and
yes,
these are the ones which, what, Joe? Just absolutely destroy a bill altogether?
pretty much. There's a difference between whether you're amending a motion versus more primarily the sort of the function of a bill entirely. So anyway, yes, I think you did a good job navigating that one, Calum. Well done.
Thank you. So then we've got to consider the number of Labour MPs who have signed this, which would be enough to defeat the government bill, to defeat the Prime Minister, if opposition parties also oppose the plans, which they're expected to do. Is this the rebels are winning here, Kirsty? This is a revolt.
Now, I don't know much, Calum, but I know a thing or two about a parliamentary rebellion. And I also know that, a week out from almost certain defeat on a second reading of a flagship piece of legislation, that people that say there will be no U-turn are simply giving themselves more pain when the U-turn comes.
Yeah.
Because you can plough ahead and defeat is certain. And if you look at the 108 people that have signed this, these are not all kind of, campaign group, hard left, soft left. There's some people in there that are, not rebellious by nature at all. So you can plough ahead. You can try and find a compromise, and whatever compromise you put forward will be viewed as a U-turn. Or you can take your bat and ball away completely and not play. Remove the bill, come back and fight another day once you've done a U-turn in the corners and hope that no one notices it, which of course they will. So actually, despite the word being reasoned, it is a very powerful amendment that sets to stop this particular piece of legislation kind of in its tracks. If they don't U-turn, they will be defeated. So it doesn't matter what they say. And the fundamental problem with this is not the direction of travel. There are lots of Labour MPs, I've read my Twitter feed this morning, saying, look, I'm not opposed to welfare cuts. I'm not opposed to, reforms that help people off welfare and back into work. But cutting PIP is not one of them. PIP is not a in-work or back-to-work benefit. It allows people to live more independently. Many of whom are on PIP are already in work in any event. So I think it's not the direction of travel, it's the kind of weird, thoughtless salami slicing of welfare, which is against your own direction of travel, which is to say we want to get people back into work. And it's come up with this wonderful hashtag taking the PIP, which is just worth it. I don't know who came up with it, but small applause hat tip for them on that one. So that's the fundamental problem with it. I think if they took out PIP, this might still survive, but a U-turn is coming as sure as eggs is eggs.
Yeah, and on PIP, so the idea is that people would have to be scoring at least 4 points on one assessment of their difficulties with daily living. And so the Times analysis of this suggests that actually many people who struggle with, for example, washing, dressing and eating would then be denied support.
And look, a classic, I'd slightly declare an interest. My son has PIP. My son is high-functioning autistic. And a lot of people will meet him and go, almost like he doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
He can't tell the time. He can't read a bus timetable or a train timetable. I wouldn't send him out into the world to find his way on public transport on a route that I hadn't helped him navigate beforehand. So how people present and how they score against a kind of, do I think he would make 4 on this? No, my guess is he probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
But does that mean he doesn't need additional help with independent living? Yes, he absolutely does.
Yeah. Joe, there's a real issue here, isn't there? If the Prime Minister can't get welfare reform over the line, when, as Kirsty's indicating, there's a general feeling that something has to be done to cut the cost of welfare, if he can't do it with a majority of 165, first of all, is he ever going to be able to curb the rising welfare bill? And second of all, is any Prime Minister ever going to be able to do anything about the welfare bill?
Well, I think, I declare an interest too that my mum is disabled, and I have been through that assessment process painfully that Kirsty talks about on many occasions. And the point I think about this was it wasn't the comms around it were not particularly good. The briefing for MPs was not great. There are a number of MPs who actually have incredibly personal stories and first-hand experience of the process, and therefore were incredibly alarmed about what was being said. And, you can go back to the sort of analogy of sledgehammer and nut in terms of the sort of process, and whether there was a sort of heavy-handed approach for something that perhaps is, whether it's simple to fix, I'm not convinced it is. And I think the challenge around how this is going to be navigated for those the group, there is a core group within this large number. There is a core group who are so passionate and so angry that their government, off the back of winter fuel, which, had already got all of their backs up, but off the back of that, this element that is felt is a completely wrong way of dealing with the welfare issue. That group are so passionate and so vocal, not externally. Many of them have not spoken out in the media, but they've been dangling that as a threat. But they are known by the whips to be problematic because they are talking to their colleagues. Their colleagues know that they're upset. And that stuff has kind of filtered through, which is why this bigger group and this bigger concern. So that's the issue, is it's sort of like it's sort of seeped through into people that perhaps maybe don't have a personal experience, but as MPs, they will have all had a case at least come through their books of somebody who had applied and had a problem during that process. So they've all seen it firsthand in some capacity. So therefore, to your point about could they ever get this through, they could get something through, perhaps not this, perhaps a version of, perhaps the issue of welfare needs to be, and how it's tackled needs to be looked at again. Perhaps some of the people that are doing the briefing on it, and I look at somebody like, we saw Darren Jones, Chief Sec, who got himself into a bit of bother when he talked about his kids and pocket money, I think was the phrase that he used, and had to sort of go out and rebat for himself after his initial bat for the government didn't go particularly well. So I think there is a general feeling that the core bit of government that's dealing with this doesn't get it. And that's what the feeling is from the MPs on the outside. And that's where I think those influential select committee chairs have actually sort of gone over the top, as it were, not in an exaggeratory way, but they've gone over the top in terms of being willing to sort of put themselves out there in a more public capacity. So I think it is problematic. I actually think on these sorts of things, it's a bit like the NHS. And I think there are times where this needs to be a much more cross-party approach to how you solve some of these problems, is some of the stuff that I think the government should have considered earlier, which they just, have not gone into.
Interesting you should say that. Kirsty's rules of comms, first of all, good comms is no panacea for poor policy. This could have been comms by the comms master, Jo Tanner herself. It wouldn't have worked because the policy is poor. The prescription, the need is right. This is the wrong policy solution for it. And I've just dug out, because this was kind of bothering me. It's not often that I say the Conservatives in the dying days probably had the right way forward on this. But I remembered, and I've just dug out the details of it, in the run-up to his decision to call the general election early, the then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was pushing welfare at the heart of the desire to cut this growing sickness benefit bill. Post-COVID, sickness benefit has gone up 40%. Right? So something is seriously amiss. They put forward a package or sort of pathway from welfare back into work, which included things like putting extra money into talking therapies, because a lot of that was about mental health problems, and it also revolved around taking sick note off GPs and putting it into work and health professionals who would give you a targeted program of getting back into work. And then ultimately, if you didn't, a tightening of work capability assessments, which is the right thing to look at as opposed to PIP, which has nothing to do with being in work or not in work. So work capability assessments. And ultimately, this program where if you don't take a job that's been offered to you and consistently turn down jobs after a year, your benefits get reduced. So you are both being incentivised and, sort of carrot and stick approach of getting back into work. I don't remember Labour having a conniption fit about that package of proposals. It seems to me at least the basis of a right way forward in trying to tackle this massive, massive sickness benefits problem that we have in a way that is suitably sympathetic, but also relatively tough. Can't we just dig that out and use that as the basis? Going after PIP is a madness. It's the wrong policy response.
And it's the wrong policy response at a time that you haven't got other measures in place to support people. And that's the issue. Kirsty's absolutely right that there have been repeated suggestions of things that could be put in place to help people, even down to, if we think about some of the people that have got problems now getting into work, are people that were massively affected during their period of education by COVID, and that they have developed issues that are now becoming more of a concern and are more debilitating as they've, grown up, because they've been isolated perhaps in certain ways. Perhaps it's mental health issues, for example, but the support has not been put in place. The wait list for many therapies that are there to help you are just that the wait lists are so long that you're just compounding a problem that somebody's got, and you're getting them no closer to having any form of independence. And that is the huge sort of, it is a massive catch-22. And I have a degree of sympathy for successive governments around that. But at the end of the day, you reap what you sow. And the problem is they didn't sow enough in the right places and the right support at the time that it was needed. And we're all paying the price for that now, particularly those people that are stuck effectively because they're not getting help to get out of the situation that they're in.
So, Joe, you're right. A relatively recent study found people in their 20s are more likely to be off work with ill health due to mental ill health than employees twice their age. So in terms of talking about comms and the right policy solution, what is the problem? First of all, I don't have an understanding. I know that, there's been this massive rise in sickness post-COVID. What is it driven by? So I want the government to explain to me what it thinks it is driven by, provide me the evidence and the data to support that, and then come up with the right package of measures to move that forward, not simply salami slice around and go, right, this is all about getting people off welfare and into work. It clearly isn't. And to me, the package that came up in the dying days of the Sunak government seems at least a sensible jump point to go in a different direction and go in the right direction.
And the point is, this is supposed to be a government focusing on prevention, not cure, right? Prevention is supposed to be the thing. And yet, if you go and talk to a charity like Whiz Kids, for example, brilliant charity that help young people who need wheelchairs, and they will tell you that there are some schools that will not allow a child to have a wheelchair that they can use on their own. They have to have a carer in the school, and it's the policy to have a particular type of wheelchair and a particular type of carer. And that then means that young, potentially independent individual at school is taught to rely on the support of another person when they don't necessarily need it. And so because at a younger age, they're not given the right equipment because the budget isn't there and the assessment isn't there, you create a dependent person when they could have been an independent person. And that becomes a much bigger challenge when you're looking at somebody getting into further education, when you're looking at somebody getting into the workplace. And we are creating problems that we don't need to be creating, because there are solutions that in particular the voluntary sector can see, but our health service is not able to work. And the education system, actually, quite frankly, if you speak to whiz kids, they'll tell you some incredible stories of what just seems like completely illogical approaches. They don't even have within the NHS a proper devoted team for just children's wheelchairs. And those wheelchairs will change. And you'll remember Chris Hope, who used to be at the Telegraph, now at GB News, talking about his daughter and the fact that she needed a prosthetic limb. And to get the next one as she grew became a huge battle. So we have these problems where we create incredibly dependent adults, which we do not need to do. We do not need to have people that are as dependent as they are. But the system doesn't help people to be free to make choices about their lives and to participate into society fully. And that's where the comms, I think, was wrong. That Kirsty's right about the policy approach, but the comms was that PIP sort of became this big thing and everybody got very upset and very worried, and nobody quite knew whether it was going to apply to them or not. And they didn't really manage to channel anything through that noise off the back of what was obviously a very bad decision on winter fuel. And so this sort of sense that the government was kind of against you rather than there to empower you or help you has been allowed to develop. And I think that's where many MPs have become incredibly uncomfortable.
Jo and Kirsty, thank you both very much for your thoughts on these big issues today. We'll keep an eye on the welfare rebellion and, of course, what's happening in the Middle East for you as well. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Thank you for being with us on Whitehall Sources. We love having you there, and we drop into your feed every single week. On next week's episode, 1 year of Sir Keir. Can you believe it's been a year since the general election?
Time flies when you're having fun.
That's right. That is absolutely right. Scarlett Maguire of Merlin Strategy joins us to assess where Labour were a year ago, polling-wise, and where they have got to now. Listen out for that, and we'll drop into your feed with that next Wednesday, and we'll talk to you then.